Welcome to Beyond the Unknown, the show that takes you deeper into these stories that shape our world. I'm Alex Carter.
And I'm Olivia Reyes.
And today we're taking on a topic that's been trending lately, for some unsettling reasons, I guess.
No.
Nuclear weapons.
Yeah. It's been in the news a lot.
It has. So we're diving into this document called The Report to uncover the story of Project Sundial. Have you heard of this?
I have. It's one of those projects that captures the anxieties of the Cold War, but the relevance kind of extends far beyond that era.
Yeah, for sure. So buckle up, listeners, because we're about to explore what Project Sundial was, what it aimed to achieve, and why, even though it was never built, it still matters today.
Right. So to understand Project Sundial, we really have to go back to the aftermath of World War II, when the world was grappling with the terrifying implications of nuclear weapons. The U.S. and the Soviet Union were locked in a tense standoff.
Yeah, the Cold War. I remember learning about this in school, all those duck and cover drills. But this Project Sundial thing, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi thriller.
It kind of is. Imagine a world where the destructive power of the Hiroshima bomb is multiplied, not by 10, not by 100.
Don't say 1,000.
But by hundreds of thousands.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. Hundreds of thousands. How is that even possible?
That was the ambition behind Project Sundial. It aimed to create a nuclear weapon with a yield of 10,000 megatons. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of 700,000 Hiroshima bombs.
Whoa, okay. Now I'm starting to see why this is trending. So who came up with this insane idea?
Well, the driving force behind Project Sundial was a physicist named Edward Teller. He was a brilliant but controversial figure, convinced that the U.S. needed an even bigger, even more powerful deterrent.
Right, because the hydrogen bomb itself wasn't terrifying enough.
Yeah. Teller believed that a weapon of this magnitude would make any adversary think twice, 3 times, 100 times before even considering launching an attack. The idea was that the sheer scale of destruction would be a deterrent, beyond anything the world had ever seen.
So how did they think they could actually build a weapon this powerful? I mean, it sounds like something out of a comic book.
They were building on the existing technology of the hydrogen bomb, which itself was a huge leap forward in destructive power. The hydrogen bomb uses a 2-stage process. A fission bomb triggers an even more powerful fusion reaction.
Okay. So far, so terrifying.
Well, for Project Sundial, scientists theorized adding even more fusion stages. Each stage would amplify the energy release of the previous one, allowing for those extreme yields, almost unimaginable.
So it was all about stacking those reactions, like dominoes of destruction. But something tells me it wasn't as easy as snapping your fingers and creating a super bomb.
You're absolutely right. The practical challenges were immense. Building a device that could contain and control that much energy was pushing the limits of what was even conceivable at the time.
Not to mention figuring out how you'd even deliver this thing. I can't imagine just strapping it to a plane.
And that's where things start to get interesting. The emergence of intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, around this time started to change the game.
So we're talking about missiles that could travel vast distances and deliver nuclear payloads with more precision.
Exactly. And this shift towards more deliverable and strategically viable nuclear weapons, combined with the sheer complexity of building a 10,000 megaton device, started to make Project Sundial seem less practical.
Less practical. I'd say it was always pretty insane. But I guess even during the Cold War, there were limits to how far they were willing to go.
Well, there were other factors at play, too. Shifts in strategic thinking that chipped away at the logic behind Project Sundial.
Okay, I'm all ears. What changed the calculus?
The concept of mutual assured destruction, or MAD as it came to be known, started to dominate military strategy. This was the grim realization that if either the U.S. or the Soviet Union launched a full-scale nuclear attack, it would guarantee their own destruction as well.
But basically the idea was, if you nuke us, we nuke you back, and everybody loses.
That's the essence of it. And in a world dominated by MAD, a weapon like the one envisioned in Project Sundial, which would cause widespread devastation beyond any single target, started to seem less strategically desirable.
So it's not just that building this monster bomb was difficult. The whole idea of what a nuclear weapon was for was starting to evolve.
Exactly. And as the strategic landscape shifted, Project Sundial began to lose its appeal.
But even though it was never built, it's still a pretty chilling reminder of how far things could have gone.
Absolutely. And it raises some important questions about the legacy of the Cold War and the choices we make when it comes to developing and controlling powerful technologies.
Speaking of legacies, what about the public? Did people even know about Project Sundial back then?
Well, at the time, Project Sundial was shrouded in secrecy like many Cold War projects. But as information about it, and other similar projects, started to trickle out, it had a profound impact on public perception of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the public staying silent about something this terrifying.
They didn't. As awareness of the potential for environmental damage from nuclear fallout grew, so did public concern about the arms race.
Right, because it's not just about the immediate blast. It's about the long-term consequences, the radiation, the contamination.
Exactly. And the release of information about projects like Sundial, even though it happened much later, fueled that sentiment. It gave people a tangible example of just how far things could go and how destructive these weapons could be.
So we've gone from the historical context of Project Sundial, its scientific underpinnings, and its strategic implications, to its impact on public perception and the rise of the anti-nuclear movement. It's a complex story with a lot of layers, and it's clear that its relevance extends far beyond the Cold War era.
Absolutely. And it begs the question, what can we learn from this history as we navigate the challenges of nuclear weapons in the 21st century?
That's a question we'll continue to explore as we move forward. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the legacy of Project Sundial and its implications for today's world. It's hard to shake this feeling that Project Sundial, even though it was never built, it still has something to teach us about the world we live in today.
Yeah, it's a story that really gets under your skin. This idea of a weapon so powerful that it could reshape continents. It really forces us to confront some pretty uncomfortable truths about human nature and our capacity for destruction.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, if this weapon had actually been built, how would the world be different today?
That's the question that haunts me. Would the sheer terror of its existence have prevented conflicts? Or would it have made the world even more volatile, a powder keg just waiting to explode?
Yeah, just the thought of a country possessing a weapon like that, it's almost too much to comprehend. It'd be like holding the power of an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, in your hands.
Yeah, it's a level of destructive power that's hard to even wrap your mind around. But I think what's even more disturbing is the mindset behind it. This belief that more power, more destructive capability automatically equals more security.
It's like this twisted logic. The bigger the stick, the safer you are.
Exactly. But as we've seen, that kind of thinking ignores the devastating consequences of these weapons. It's not just about the initial blast. It's about the fallout, the long-term environmental damage, the potential for a nuclear winter.
Not to mention the human cost. We're talking about millions, maybe billions of lives at stake.
And that's why Project Sundial, despite its flaws and its failure, is such an important story to remember. It's a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement and the need for ethical considerations.
So in a way, Project Sundial's failure was a blessing in disguise.
I think that's a fair assessment. It forced the world to confront the true nature of nuclear weapons and the potentially catastrophic consequences of their use.
And it paved the way for a more cautious, more restrained approach to nuclear weapons, right? We're still living with the threat of nuclear war. But at least we've managed to avoid using them for over 70 years.
That's right. And a lot of that has to do with the public's growing awareness of the dangers of nuclear weapons and the push for disarmament that followed.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that Project Sundial, this terrifying weapon that was never even built, played a role in that shift in public consciousness.
It's a testament to the power of information and open dialogue about these critical issues. The more we understand about the history and the choices that were made, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions about our future.
So we've talked about the past, but what about the present? You mentioned earlier that Project Sundial, it has relevance to current discussions about nuclear modernization. Can you unpack that a bit?
Of course. Today, we're seeing a renewed interest in nuclear weapons modernization from several countries. They're developing more accurate delivery systems, enhancing existing warheads, and even exploring new types of nuclear weapons.
And this is raising some serious concerns, right? It feels like we're slipping back into old patterns of thinking. That same logic, more power equals more security.
Exactly, and that's why Project Sundial is such a relevant story today. It reminds us that the pursuit of better or more advanced nuclear weapons can be a dangerous and slippery slope.
So are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Not necessarily, but it requires vigilance, transparency, and a willingness to engage in those difficult conversations about the role of nuclear weapons in the 21st century.
It sounds like the lessons of Project Sundial are more relevant than ever.
They are, and they challenge us. to think critically about whether nuclear weapons truly guarantee our security or create a false sense of safety, while increasing the risk of global catastrophe.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the science, the strategy, the history, the public perception. But there's one big question that's still lingering for me.
And what's that?
Well, if a weapon, like the one envisioned in Project Sundial, actually existed today, what would that mean for the world? What would it mean for you and me?
That's a chilling thought, isn't it? And it leads us to a whole other set of questions, questions that are even more unsettling and perhaps even more important to consider.
So we've been talking about Project Sundial, this almost mythical Cold War project to create a nuclear weapon of unimaginable power. You know, it's one thing to talk about it in the abstract, but it's another thing to imagine it actually existing in the world today.
It's a thought that sends chills down my spine. To think that somewhere out there, someone could have their finger on the button of a weapon capable of causing such widespread devastation.
Yeah, it's almost like a doomsday device, isn't it? I mean, if a weapon like that were used, wouldn't it be the end of everything?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but the consequences, they would be catastrophic. We're talking about global climate disruption, widespread famine, radioactive fallout that could render vast areas uninhabitable for generations.
And that's not even considering the immediate impact. A 10,000 megaton blast would just obliterate entire cities, maybe even countries.
It's difficult to even comprehend the scale of destruction. But beyond the physical damage, there's the psychological impact, the fear, the uncertainty, the sense that the world, as we know it, could end at any moment.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. But even if this weapon wasn't used, just the fact that it existed, it would change everything, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It would completely reshape global politics. Countries might feel pressured to develop their own superweapons, leading to a new arms race, even more dangerous.
And what about the risk of accidents or miscalculations? I mean, with a weapon that powerful, even a small mistake could have unimaginable consequences.
That's a terrifying thought, isn't it? It highlights the inherent instability of a world where such weapons exist. It'd be like living with a sword of Damocles over our heads, a constant threat.
So in a way, the fact that Project Sundial was never realized, this weapon never saw the light of day, is that a reason for hope?
I think so. It shows that even in the darkest days of the Cold War, there were limits. And it reminds us that we have a choice. We can choose a different path, one that prioritizes diplomacy, disarmament, and the pursuit of peace.
But isn't that just wishful thinking? I mean, there are still so many nuclear weapons out there, and tensions between countries are running pretty high these days.
You're right. The threat is real. We can't afford to be complacent. But the story of Project Sundial reminds us of the power of public awareness and activism. The anti-nuclear movement that emerged during the Cold War played a crucial role in pushing for arms control and raising global consciousness about the dangers of nuclear weapons.
So what you're saying is we're not powerless. We can make a difference.
Exactly. We can educate ourselves, engage in conversations with our friends and family, and support organizations that are working towards a world free of nuclear weapons.
It's a daunting challenge, but it's also incredibly important.
And it's a challenge that requires all of us to participate, because ultimately, the fate of our planet rests in our hands.
Well, that's a sobering thought. And a reminder that the legacy of Project Sundial, this relic of the Cold War, is still very much alive today.
It is, and it challenges us to confront not only the destructive power of technology, but also the choices we make, the values we prioritize, and the future we want to create.
So we started this deep dive with a question. What if a weapon like the one envisioned in Project Sundial actually existed today? And I think we've come to a pretty clear answer.
A world with a 10,000 megaton bomb would be a world on the brink, a world where fear and uncertainty reign supreme.
And that's a world we should all be working to prevent. So thanks for joining us on this journey beyond the unknown. We'll see you next time.